Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined this Friday morning by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Derek Brown. Fellas, it is week 14. D-Bro, I talked a little bit about this with Fitz on yesterday's show with Erickson, but how are you lining up here in the final week of the regular season for most fantasy leagues? Are you set to make the playoffs? Do you have a number of do or die games this week? How you looking?
Doing good, man. I got a few teams that are unfortunately dealing with the bye week issues. I got a lot of Jaden Daniels. I think my biggest reaction right now is honestly like staring at my best ball teams, and I have so many that are on the cusp of like advancing like third to second place or right on. Like I could really use Jaden Daniels playing this week, man. Ooh.
Yeah, we were talking yesterday. Fitz is taking a beating from bye weeks in Scott Fishbowl this week, so
Oh yeah.
hoping to advance. I'm a little better suited than he is in terms of the bye weeks.
In our Fantasy Pros League, one of those, I think it's the Raphael League. I think I'm starting my entire starting lineup is almost all waiver wire guys because I didn't look at bye weeks, and almost everybody in my starting lineup is on bye this week.
We've got our content team league, that 14-teamer, and I've got Lamar, and it's, you don't have a backup quarterback. These rosters are so long. So I went to pick somebody up, and then I realized that our playoffs actually start this week, and I got a bye, so I didn't need to pick up a replacement week quarterback anyway.
Oh, listen to that flex.
Very fortunate. Yeah, it was not a flex. It was lucky. I was surprised to find this out. And,
it was kind of a flex. Oh, well, I had to go get a quarterback. Oh, well, I got to buy.
I mean, I had a good draft, I guess, but like that's not a league that we're like, putting too much time and effort into. So I will call it luck more than anything else. I can admit that. This is our Friday show. We're going to run through some key questions here for week 14. All of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Quick reminder that if you're juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling overwhelmed as you get to the fantasy playoffs, Fantasy Pros will help you simplify things. With Fantasy Pros Multi-League Assistant, you can see the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all your teams. It's all in one spot, making your path to victory clearer and easier. Dive in and let us help you dominate all your leagues with the Multi-League Assistant at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Fitz, let's start with you here on the Sunday slate. Panthers at Eagles. Bryce Young looking the best he ever has at the NFL level recently. Which other player in this offense benefits the most for fantasy managers with Young looking more capable?
I'm going to say Chuba Hubbard. Just improved play from Bryce Young means longer drives, more plays, more scoring opportunities for Hubbard. And when it gets down to it, Chuba Hubbard is still really the only member of the Panthers I want to start, especially at this time of year in do or die fantasy games. I don't want to start Adam Thielen in a playoff game. I don't want to start Xavier Legette in a playoff game. And Bryce Young has been better, but he has still thrown multiple touchdown passes in only one of his 9 games this season. I don't really want to play anyone from this passing game this week in a really nasty matchup against the Eagles.
Yeah, what do you think, D-Bro? Is it Chuba Hubbard just because, rising tide lifts all boats, or is it a guy like Adam Thielen who had a really nice game with Bryce Young last week?
Yeah, I think Chuba Hubbard is definitely a player we need to talk about here. He's still, I know people look at the box scores, they're not going to look at the snaps and stuff like that. He's still the workhorse in this backfield. So let's not get it twisted. Jonathan Brooks, his role increased last week, but this offense being better overall is going to both raise the ceiling and the floor weekly for Chuba Hubbard, but I'll give some shine to the pass catchers, man. I mean, having competent quarterback play is obviously going to help. And, not only just for this week, but looking at this from, because when I looked at this question, Worm, I kept like going back to the dynasty angle for this and saying, okay, this gives some actual credence to, okay, what could Xavier Legette do down the stretch, or Jatavian Sanders? And what are our thoughts going to be going into the offseason about them?
I wanted to, first, before going to the next question, Bryce Young did have a decent game against the Chiefs. Does that give you guys any extra confidence? Because this is a very tough matchup, right? Like Philly's this insane defense, especially the last several weeks. They've been, possibly the best defense in football. The fact that we saw him do it, it's not like he, set the world on fire, but had a really good game for his standards against Kansas City. Does that give you any extra confidence, Fitz, against Philly?
Not really. And again, like Chuba is the only guy I think we're considering. And to Debro's point, people seem to be freaking out about Chuba this week, but he did outsnap Jonathan Brooks, I think 55-15 last week. And
Mhm.
Brooks just happened to get touches on 9 of those 15
Yep.
snaps. So it looked like he was more involved than he really was in reality. It's not to say Chuba is guaranteed of having a good fantasy day against this Eagles defense that's been playing so well under Vic Fangio. But I should ask you, Wormer, are you going to be upset if the Panthers have a better offensive showing this week against the Eagles than the Ravens did last week?
I don't know if I would say, but first of all, Debro,
Ooh.
please note it on the calendar that I didn't mention the Ravens. Fitz did. I
Yes, but in a gaslighting fashion, which I am totally on board with.
I
Love you
considered
for it,
doing a bit
Fitzy.
of, like, first key question, what are the Ravens going to do over the bye week, just to annoy you? But I decided not to do that. And then Fitz brought it home anyway. No, honestly, I mean, it was just one of those games where everything goes wrong. And obviously, like, when Justin Tucker is missing 2 field goals and an extra point, like, it's just not your day. So,
sorry,
no,
I kid because I love Worm, and hey, your team is not going to lose this week. My team has already lost, so you're one up on me.
I can't decide which week the Ravens have a better chance of winning or a better chance of not losing. This week against the bye week or next week against the Giants. It feels about the same in my opinion. I shouldn't have said that because now if it does come back to bite me, that's gonna be really bad. All right. Anyways, I do have a second question on this game. I just want to ask kind of for fun, how high would the over-under have to be set, Debro, for you to not take the over on Saquon rushing yards this week?
So, from a betting perspective, I don't want to touch this at all because, dude, his line right now is at 99.5 and the over is juiced the last time I looked at it to minus 170. So, first of all, I don't want to touch this line. But, like,
having said that, is that an unreasonable line given what he's looked like?
No, it's not. It's really not. Like, I was going to say, like, you'd have to push this line for me not to, like, theoretically not take the over. I mean, he's averaged 100, almost 125 rushing yards per game. So, like, in this matchup, you'd have to push that line. Assuming, say, we got a minus 110, I'd have to see that line, like, somewhere at, like, 10, probably 110, 112 to not want to hit the over for it. But maybe I'm just crazy.
Fitz, what would it have to be for you?
So when I looked at this number on DraftKings, last time I checked, it was 113.5. And I did not bet the over on that just because I'm concerned that maybe the Eagles decide to give Saquon a little bit of a rest early in the second half of this one. But I was wondering what it would take for me to actually bet the under on Saquon, what that number would need to be. For me to want to hit the under, I think it would probably have to be something like 128.5 for me to actually consider betting the under.
Would it have to be plus money, Fitzy, or would you hit it at like minus 110 if you got?
Yeah, if it was like minus the usual minus 115, I think I'd still bet under at 128.5. I mean, that's a massive number, but obviously it's the best running back in the game going against the worst run defense in the game. So,
man,
it's kind of the conversation we used to have with the Cooper Kupp receiving yardage lines. Like, okay, well, we're not going to go to the over, right? But I mean, it just keeps hitting.
Yep.
Dude, his rushing totals since week 7, 176, 108, 159, 66, 146, 255, 107, and now he gets the Panthers. I mean, the number cannot possibly be too high.
I've got a good little offshoot question here, Worm. Y'all remember the conversation that Nick Sirianni had on the sideline with Saquon about, like, do you want me to pull you out? This is the most rushing yards you've ever had. If, to Fitzy's point, would they pull him out of the game even if they are just crushing the Panthers, or do you see them running it up because they want to get him, like, to the league record rushing yards for the season? I think they keep him in, but
it's a good question. I mean, on the one hand, Saquon, well, I'm sure he would like to get to that mark. He, like you said, there was that clip, like, he's a team player and, wants to give other guys their shine. Having said that, like, you're now close enough to the end of the season where it feels like a much more attainable goal. Like, first half of the year, it's like, okay, yeah, well, is he really going to get there? Now it's like, you're like a month, like a really good month away from history. So I think that's a really good call, Debro. What do you think, Fitz?
Doesn't he have, like, contract incentives tied to yardage? Because I know they're not tied to touchdowns because he was
probably
a smart man.
I haven't looked at his contract, but
I mean, if they're smart, they don't leave him in because this team has serious championship designs. Like last I checked, the futures odds for winning the Super Bowl, Lions were the favorites, and then it was the Chiefs, Bills, and the Eagles in a 3-way tie.
I think if he's like over 100, they're probably not pushing it. If he's at like a low number that maybe knocks him off pace, maybe they like toy with the idea. But I mean, Fitz is correct. The smart thing to do would be to not think about that at all in approaching this game. But
So he
it's hard not
does
to
have
with
good
history.
incentives and stuff like that. Like he's got I'm looking at it right now. So $250,000 for plus 1,500 scrimmage yards, another $250,000 for plus 2,000 scrimmage yards, and then some other ones that are tied to like if they get to the conference championship and win, if they win the Super Bowl, or if he's an All Pro and stuff like that.
I would guess that he'd be more motivated by the idea of setting the rushing record than he would
Yeah.
like he makes enough money. Not that you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to make
No, I
more
get it.
money, but like I would think that the motivating factor would be, history or not. But
Mhm.
let's go to the next game. Jets at Dolphins. Which Jet coming off a poor game has a better chance of bouncing back in Miami? Debra, I'll start with you. Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall?
I'm going to say Garrett Wilson because right now, as we're recording this, I don't even know if Breece Hall plays this week, considering he's banged up with a knee issue. But I mean, honestly, even if we assume Breece Hall is healthy and he's going to plays normal role, I'm still going to pick Garrett Wilson. Miami has had a very good run defense for most of the season. I mean, look, they just shut down Josh Jacobs. I think they're going to do the same thing to this run game. And Garrett Wilson, I mean, look, he's going to get the targets. I think the coverage matchup leans a little bit more in his favor, so I'm going to take Wilson here.
Yeah, it's a good point. I made the outline a little earlier in the week this week, and he hasn't practiced in the days since then, so it obviously is not trending in the right direction for Breece Hall. Our They Playing tool at FantasyPros.com actually only gives him a 12% chance to play.
Oh
So
wow,
it's a good point. That's a little actually even more negative than I had expected. So that's pretty low based on this practice stuff. Fitz, what do you think? A, just kind of about Breece Hall in general, but B, if he were to play, who would you like better in the matchup?
Yeah, I mean, if Hall plays, he's probably not going to get 20 carries and 5 catches. It would be a lighter day for him with Braylon Allen making more significant contributions. So Garrett Wilson, and I know he's had like 3 clunker games in a row as of now, but it wasn't that long ago that he was on fire. Over a 5-game stretch from week 5 to week 9, he had 40 catches, 472 yards, and 4 touchdowns, and it was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy scoring over that stretch. So not too far-fetched to expect a bounce back from Garrett Wilson after a couple of bad games. But then again, I think Aaron Rodgers has been under 200 passing yards in 3 straight, and it just seems like this offense is coming off the rails.
So
he's getting the volume. Six targets, 8 targets, 10 targets. It's just Aaron Rodgers sucks.
Let's pivot then on this question because of the injury with Hall. Where are you guys ranking Braylon Allen this week?
Ooh.
I mean, right now I've still got him like in the 30s because I'm ranking Breece Hall as if he's going to play. But if he doesn't practice, if we don't see Hall practicing on Friday, I will vault Braylon Allen into I don't know, somewhere in RB2 territory, mid-range to low-end RB2.
I'm just going to put him exactly where I had Breece Hall at RB16 is where I'll put Braylon Allen.
Let's go to Falcons at Vikings. We got a revenge game narrative here from Kirk Cousins, but I want to ask about Kyle Pitts, who has 6 receptions and 10.5 fantasy points total since he had that big game in week 8. That's total 10.5 fantasy points. And by the way, 4 of those receptions came in one game. So the other games combined, he has 2 receptions since week 8. Why isn't he ranked even lower than tight end 14 in ECR this week, Fitz?
Probably because people don't have immense faith in the likes of Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Noah Gray, Mike Gesicki, Grant Calcaterra, guys ranked below him. But I get the premise of your question, Worm. Like I have Kyle Pitts ranked tight end 15 and really don't want to play him against Minnesota this week. He's had 6 catches for 75 yards over his last 4 games, and 55 of those 75 yards came in one game. So he's just been kind of a non-factor, not really playing on every down anymore, just sort of obvious passing downs. Like, yeah, I mean, he is just stopped producing on anything close to a reliable basis.
Debra?
Yeah. I echo all of Fitzy's points here, and I will say I have Kyle Pitts at tight end 18 this week. I do not want to play him. I have, and this is assuming Dalton Kincaid does not play this week. I have Dawson Knox, Jake Ferguson, Grant Calcaterra, and Juwan Johnson, and Pat Fryermuth all ranked over Kyle Pitts. I've already bet the under on Kyle Pitts' receiving yardage. I was actually kind of like really happily surprised how high it was because one, he is coming off a season low 41% of the snaps. So Fitzy talked about he's not playing. It's not even on like just every down. He's not even playing on even half the snaps. But he has been allergic to catching passes against too high coverage, and Minnesota runs that at the highest rate in the freaking NFL. Kyle Pitts versus too high coverage, 0.95 yards per route run, not good. 11.5% first read share, not good. There is no way I want to play Kyle Pitts this week. If it burns me, it burns me. I will stream any one of those guys over Kyle Pitts.
Man, what a fall from grace. I really was like,
Sucks, man.
Going into the season, I was like, I'm willing to give him one more chance. And it's just outside of that, like a couple week stretch that was kind of fun in the middle of the year. It's just been same old. So it's really just
been bad.
The NFL season is rolling along and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, is the number one place to bet touchdowns. Fade to the corner of the end zone, running back breaks through the line and gallops 60 yards to score. We don't care how they get them. We just want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings is the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Tons of teams on bye, 6 to be in fact, in Week 14, and tons of big spreads in the games we do get. But there is at least one standout matchup on Sunday Night Football with the Chargers in Kansas City. Chiefs laying 4 points at home against Justin Herbert and company. Should be a super fun matchup. Odds and lines are subject to change on those, but whichever game you bet, here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I said there's at least one standout matchup that we get on Sunday Night Football. We did have another one last night, which we didn't really talk about at the top of the show, but what a great Thursday night game. It's so nice when Thursday like has a ton of hype and then actually lives up to it. I know, Fitz, maybe you were less happy watching that game given the outcome, but really fun back and forth and gave us some good discourse. We were talking before the show about Dan Campbell going forward on fourth, just for the listeners to hear. Debra, what'd you think about that call?
I mean, I'm with it, man. I mean, Dan Campbell basically said, look, if this is what our division title comes down to, I'm putting the ball in the hands of my guys, and that's how I'm going to roll with it. And I've got nothing against that. Like, analytics, not yes, no. I mean, Fitzy, I'm gonna turn this over to Fitzy because I think he brought up an even better point of, or maybe it was you, Worm, whoever said that it was not even the most egregious fourth down call that he made in the whole freaking game. Like, I think that's the better point here. Like, I have no issues with what he did at the end of the game. None.
Yeah, Fitz, what did you think watching that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan Campbell definitely toes the line between aggression and recklessness. And I know, fantasy Twitter celebrates the aggression. And I had no problem with that call. I think if you looked at like the expected value of that call going forward versus kicking the field goal, it was probably a pretty close call between what was technically the right move. But going for it earlier on his own 30-yard line, I mean, and then pairing that with kind of a questionable call by Ben Johnson on that wide run by Jahmyr Gibbs, sort of an all or nothing running play when you only need 1 yard. I thought that was veering into reckless territory. And we saw the recklessness last year in the NFC Championship game against the 49ers, like eschewing the field goal opportunity. And, a lot of Lions fans were upset with Dan Campbell about that. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to be aggressive. We've seen that, but you just hope that he stays on the aggressive side of the line and doesn't veer into recklessness. But I couldn't be too disappointed with the Packers. I thought they played a really good game, but you have to play a great game to beat the Lions in their building, and they fell short of playing a great game.
By the way, on that game, do we have interest in Tim Patrick moving forward the rest of the way as a guy to add for the fantasy playoffs?
I just don't think I don't think we can rely on the target counts. That's it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, it's
That's kind
just
of where I'm at.
like we're not even. I don't know if even Amon-Ra St. Brown investors are entirely happy with the target counts they've been getting. So Tim Patrick, I don't know.
If there were better matchups upcoming, then I would say maybe you put him on the flex radar. But against the Bills, the Bears, the 49ers, it's not like. I think we're going to have better options. I think the question is warranted. But for me, it was very disappointing because I was a week early on Patrick. Like in the Thanksgiving primer, I was like, oh, yeah, versus deep passing. And then he goes out and he doesn't catch the end zone target. And then I watch him catch 2 tutties versus
I've
the
always
Packers.
liked
I'm like,
Patrick.
oh.
I'm happy to see him.
He is a great.
Have a
That
good
is
game.
one of the cool
Yeah.
stories of 2024.
Really cool.
That this guy who's had multiple season-ending injuries in training camps, and now he's making like important catches in December for a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Like,
Yeah.
really good story.
He's one of the guys where it's like, if at the end of the year, you know, the Lions do the thing and they get the Super Bowl title and he's one of the guys where you're like, you know what? I really wanted that guy to get a ring. Like, I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I agree. D-Bro, do you want to take 10 seconds to gush about Christian Watson?
I mean, if you're going to set me up, sure. Dude,
10 seconds.
I just, look, I keep saying it every single week, and we got it this week, boys. Give Christian Watson a lot of targets, and let's mess around and find out. And the Packers did. And Christian Watson, like, yes, okay, the fumble was not great. Okay, that's fine. Trying to make a big play and making big plays. And I think the bigger thing, like, we need to take away from this is also in the same conversation, Jayden Reed flopping is a problem in the sense of, in the context of this offense, the scary thing about Reed moving forward is he's not playing in 2 wide sets. And in this run-heavy version of the Packers, that's making a big difference in his volatility week to week. So while I want to give a lot of shine to Watson, awesome game, love him, there's also a lot of scary stuff about Jayden Reed.
By the way, I know we're going a little long on this game in the middle of the show, but I just also wanted to ask, because it was a really fun game. Josh Jacobs, where are we going to rank him next year if he finishes the way he has been? He has been a top 6 running back in half PPR scoring in 5 of his last 6 games. And that's kind of assuming he's going to be there this week with the 3 touchdowns. So maybe this week he goes lower. Obviously, right now he's number 1 because only 1 game has happened. But even leading up to this game where he just had 3 touchdowns, in week 8, he was RB2. Week 9, he was RB21. Then he had a bye. Then he was RB5, RB2, RB6, and then 3 touchdowns last night. He has been awesome. I expected him to be pretty good in Green Bay. I didn't expect him to be this good, Fitz.
And I know D-Bro and I were both sort of worried that Matt LaFleur has traditionally not been a 1 running back guy, and that maybe he would kind of turn Jacobs into like a committee back. Obviously hasn't been the case. Jacobs is getting all the work. And man, this guy is just built to take a pounding. Like, he is different, man. Like, he is really tough. One of the best inside runners, I think, in the league, if not the best, just because this guy can pick his way through traffic so well. So yeah, I just, the fit could not be better in this offense, and I'll probably have him inside RB1 territory next year, probably somewhere in the RB8 to RB12 range, I would guess.
I'm looking. Yep. He's doing it like each week. It might be something different, right? Like since week 7, in every game, he's had either 95 rushing yards, or at least 5 targets in the passing game, or multiple touchdowns. And in some of the weeks, multiple of those things are true. But I mean, it's just there's always some path to him providing for you in fantasy. He hasn't been lower than RB25 since week 3, and that's the only week of the season he has been, beyond that mid-20s point. So just a high floor and a high ceiling, and looking like a league winner, honestly, the way he's been playing the last month. So awesome to see for Josh Jacobs, one of many running backs, as we've talked about all season, in new teams. Saquon, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs are all crushing it. It's super cool to see, honestly. All right, let's go to Jags at Titans. A lot, D-Bro, is being made of this being a Calvin Ridley revenge game. Are you buying that narrative?
I am buying into that narrative in a big way. And a lot of this comes down to, if you were to tell me that the Jags were going to do coverage-wise what they have done in previous weeks, which is feature a lot of too high coverage, then I'd be much lower on Ridley. Now, what the Jags have done over the last 2 weeks is they have moved to a lot of single high coverage. So they, over the last 2 games, they have featured single high at the 6th highest rate. So almost 66 of their defensive snaps. Calvin Ridley is one of these guys, and there's a big bucket of these wide receivers that have had massive splits the entire season, two high coverage versus single high coverage. And Calvin Ridley's numbers versus single high have been awesome. Like since week 10, and he's been getting the target share, 25.5% target share, 2.8 yards per route run, and almost a 30% first read share against single high. So while I'm not going to go too far down narrative street, this is one where I feel like the analytics, the data lines up with narratives. Yeah, I'm dancing down narrative street with Calvin Ridley this week. Already bet his overs.
Where do you have him ranked, D-Bro?
Oh, good question. I've got him as wide receiver. Actually, my ranking is kind of blasphemous. I'm going to update this right now on the show. I'm moving him up to wide receiver 14.
Wide receiver 14 is exactly where he is in ECR fits. For you, is
Oh,
that
crap.
too
I need to
too
move
low
him
or
up
just right?
higher. Wow. Jeez.
Yeah, I've got him at wide receiver 12, so I'm above ECR on him. And am I buying the idea of Ridley having a big game because he wants revenge on the Jacksonville Jaguars? Not really. But am I buying the idea that Calvin Ridley has a big game because the Jaguars' pass defense is abysmal? Yes, very much so. The Jags are 32nd in DVOA against the pass. They have given up the higher opponent passer rating in the league by far. They've given up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers. And the last two lead receivers the Jaguars have faced were Amon-Ra St. Brown, who had 11 catches for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Nico Collins, who had 8 catches for 119 yards. So, yes, I think Calvin Ridley's going to have a big game this week.
Did I miss some reason? He's actually fallen in ECR the last 2 days. He was wide receiver 11 and then dropped down. Was there something that caused him to drop down? I don't
Just
think so.
Nick Westbrook Akine fever. And
No.
how could we rank Calvin Ridley so high when Nick Westbrook
NWI.
Akine is out there?
I think it's more that other receivers have gotten up in the rankings, and so by nature somebody had to drop. But yeah, he's in that high end wide receiver.
Which also pray for me, boys. I've got Will Levis faith this week. I'm scared. I'm scared, but I have faith in Will Levis this week.
Braver than I am. Let's go to Browns at Steelers. From Patrick Doherty, friend of the pod, on Twitter, Jerry Jeudy leads the NFL in receiving in the 6 weeks since Jameis Winston took over as starter, even with the Browns bye coming during that span. Obviously, Jeudy is coming off this massive Monday night game in Denver fits. So what are our expectations for him against a stout Steelers offense with him not only coming off this huge game, but having been very good since Winston took over?
Yeah, I think he's averaged 122 yards a game in Winston's start so far. Obviously, a little skewed by the big game, the 200-plus yard game against Denver. But so I only have Jeudy ranked wide receiver 26 this week. And here's why. When the Browns played the Steelers a couple of weeks ago in that snowy game in Cleveland, Jeudy was mostly drawing coverage from Joey Porter Jr., and Jeudy actually got the better of Porter that game. Only 6 targets, but he caught all 6 of them for 85 yards. I think Joey Porter Jr. is going to be out for revenge this week. Almost surely is going to shadow Jeudy, especially if Cedric Tillman doesn't return. And the game is in Pittsburgh. As good as Winston and the Winston-Jeudy combination have been lately, I don't love the outlook for Jerry Jeudy this week.
What do you think, D-Bro? In looking at Jeudy, since Winston took over, at least 73 receiving yards in every game, at least 8 targets in 4 out of 5 games, at least 11 targets in 3 out of 5 games. The volume's been there.
Yeah, I don't know if Porter follows him. Like, if he does, I agree with everything Fitz said. My worry about it is like, okay, the last time that they played them, they put Jeudy in the slot 55% of his time. So do they try to hide him? Because I was low on Jeudy last week. I said, okay, well, Denver, the smart thing that you do to take Jeudy away is you put Surtain on him, 80-90% of his routes, let him follow into the slot, and you take Jeudy away. Denver said, no, I don't care. We don't respect him enough to do that. Look, if the Steelers do that and they put Joey Porter Jr. in his back pocket, then yes, it's a down game for Jerry Jeudy. If they don't, Judy's going to eat him up because this secondary has been exposed in recent weeks. So since week 8, Pittsburgh has allowed the second most receiving yards per game and the 13th highest or most, PPR points per target to perimeter wide receivers. So it's a wide range of outcomes for Jerry Jeudy this week.
Let's look at Bears at 49ers. Where should Isaac Guerendo, obviously like the wire darling of the week, where should Guerendo be ranked in his first week as the presumptive lead back for the Niners Fitz?
Where should he be ranked? So I'll just assume that I'm right on where he should be ranked. And I've got him at RB10. So I'm definitely above consensus. Like he is a good bet for 15 to 20 carries against a Bears run defense that ranks 30th in DVOA and has given up the 10th most fantasy points to running back. So it's a good spot for him. I think they need him. Behind him, we've got, Deebo Samuel is probably effectively the backup running back here because I don't know how much we're going to see of Patrick Taylor or Izzy Abanikanda, who's, had less than a week to digest the 49ers playbook. So I think it's going to be a heavy dose of Isaac Guerendo, and the matchup is really appealing.
Yeah. So Guerendo is RB15 for the record in ECR. So Fitz, several spots higher. Debro, it sounds like you agree that he should be higher than 15.
I have him at RB10 as well.
Okay.
So I agree absolutely with Fitzy. This is Jordan Mason 2.0, people. Like, let's not overthink this. He's going to get 15 to 20 touches. He's been good on the touches that he's gotten this year. This is not like, okay, a scrub running back put into the starting lineup of a bot. This is not an Amir Abdullah situation. Let's talk about it that way. And Isaac Guerendo with the work he's gotten so far this year, and I know it's a small sample, it's only 42 carries, 9.5% explosive run rate, 21% missed tackle rate. Those are both really dang good to solid. Now you match that up with Chicago's not stopping anybody. Like I fought with Joe about this earlier in the week, and does Chicago win this game? Chicago's entire skill players are all beaten up. I think San Francisco comes out and hands the Chicago Bears a loss in this game. I think Guerendo is going to have a really good game, and Chicago's run defense has been terrible, man. Like, since week 8, they're allowing the 3rd most rushing yards per game and the 6th highest explosive run rate. You're playing right into Kyle Shanahan's hands. Let him run the ball. Guerendo's going to rip off some big runs this week.
I might have Guerendo ranked even higher if Trent Williams were assured of playing. Like that's the only concern here is that the 49ers big left tackle, one of the best offensive linemen in the game, probably isn't going to be around for this game.
To your point though, Fitzy, the Bears run defense has been so freaking bad, it might not even matter.
Right.
Impromptu starter sit, Guerendo or James Cook this week?
Oh, good Lord. I want to play both.
Yeah,
this is the decision people will have to make because you didn't draft Guerendo to be like one of your top 3 running backs. So if you picked him up, you're gonna have to start him over a quality player.
Huh? You're not gonna have to start. You're starting him in the flex. A lot of people would be, right?
It's possible, but if you're still playing for this season, you probably have a pretty good team. You've probably acquired some amount of depth. Running backs have largely been healthy this year, so you probably are pretty set there. I agree that obviously you want to play both, but I think it's worth asking about a name like that because I think people will have to make that decision.
Not James Cook, but I'll give you a few names of players that I have right below him in rankings, and I'm curious where Fitzy is on them as well. Like, I will play Guerendo over James Conner. I will play Guerendo, and this is going to be a blasphemous name. People are going to hate this. I will play Guerendo over Bucky Irving. I will play Guerendo over Kenneth Walker. I will play Guerendo over Tony Pollard. Like, I know Bucky Irving is the one name that everybody's going to be like, oh, really? Like, come on. Like, oh, yeah, I'm playing him over Bucky Irving.
Fitz?
I've got Guerendo ranked ahead of all those guys except Bucky Irving. I've got Bucky at RB8. And I might bring down the ranking of Bucky a little depending on the medical outlook for him this week. But as for the original James Cook question, Worm, I've got Guerendo 10th, Cook 12th. So it's a really close call for sure. The Rams have been getting beaten up. Obviously, the big Saquon game, Alvin Kamara had over 100 rushing yards against them last week. So it is a good spot for Cook, no question about it.
And to pull back that, to answer your question, Worm, I won't play him over James Cook. I've got James Cook at RB8, but it's close.
Growing up, basketball was never near the top list of my favorite sports. I always preferred baseball, then football as I got older. Once I was in college at Maryland, I completely fell in love with the atmosphere at college basketball games, the energy, the passion, the noise, the chills. There's no fan experience in the world quite like a high-level college hoops game. kind of like Maryland, absolutely beating the doors off Ohio State a couple of nights ago to kick off their Big Ten conference season. That was really exciting as a Terp fan. I still remember storming the court in my final game as a student senior year against UVA. Now that I'm a decade past my days as a student, when I need basketball tickets, I turn to Game Time. Game Time has this new feature called Game Time Picks, which filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. The list of my favorite features on the Game Time app is too long to read everything, but here are some standouts for me personally. I love the Game Time Picks curation, obviously, especially since I can use it for not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. I also love the all-in pricing, so there are no surprise fees at checkout. There's nothing in the world more infuriating to me than thinking I know what I'm about to spend on a purchase, then getting hit with that surprise fee at the last second. That doesn't happen with Game Time. Plus, I also appreciate the seat views to get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you commit to buying. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, guys, let's go to Bills at Rams. And Fitz, my key question here, Amari Cooper is wide receiver 70 in fantasy points per game since being traded to Buffalo. That's points per game, not just overall. Is he at all startable against the Rams?
Oh, borderline. I've got him ranked wide receiver 37. And I mean, in Amari Cooper's first game with the Bills, he had 5 targets, 4 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Kind of a promising start for him. He's played 3 games with the Bills since then, missing a couple because of a wrist injury. His target counts in those 3 games, 2, 3, and 3. So Cooper is terrific, perennially underrated. But it's really hard to trust him until he starts drawing some targets. So until we see that, I just can't really trust him in my lineup.
What are you doing with Cooper, D-Bro?
I'm grinning ear to ear because I'm I'm over the moon for Amari Cooper this week. And this comes down to, I think, last week's snow game, and that game being a blowout is hiding the fact that Amari Cooper was on his way to being a full-time player. So if you look at the first half of last week's game, he had the second highest route share on the team, only behind Khalil Shakir. So Shakir was at 80%. Amari Cooper was at 70%. He's opened the week with full practices. I think this is the breakout game for Amari Cooper this week. I'm going out on a limb for this, and my ranking of him is also with that. Like, I'm aggressive. I have Amari Cooper at wide receiver 21. I understand that I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm doing so with the idea that he was quietly going to be a full-time player last week. The elements, the entire, everything around that game threw that off. So I think we're getting the flop lag game of Amari Cooper being a full-time player in this offense. He's finally fully healthy, and the matchup is fantastic, man. I mean, the Rams since week 7, they're allowing the highest PPR points per target to perimeter wide receivers. And we still don't even know if Keon Coleman's going to play this week. I think he does play, but he's the guy, is he going to play a full-time role? Because I don't think he's fully healthy. So to me, this is the Cooper breakout week.
Wow. So when you said that, I went to look it up because I was like, that sounds really high. Of our 100+ experts that we have in the expert consensus rankings, you are the highest on Amari Cooper this week.
I'm fine with that. I know I'm out on a limb with this. I get that. But Dalton Kincaid, not 100%. Keon Coleman, we don't know if it's 100%. Curtis Samuel is banged up. Cooper legit could get peppered with targets this week.
And he's Erickson's flag plant guy this week.
I just want what I want right now. And as we're recording this right now, I am continuing to look on bettingpros.com. Just post me a line, books. I need a line because I just want to bet Amari Cooper ladders this week. That's all I want.
Is there there's no props out for
There's
him?
no line yet. And I know why.
What?
I get it. It's because they don't know if Keon Coleman's playing and stuff like that. Once we get designations, they'll post a line. I will be in the Betting Pros Discord, and I will tell people I sent the message on Tuesday when I looked at this game and wrote it up. I said, we're betting Amari Cooper ladders this week, people.
Yeah.
I just need lines.
DraftKings does have like anytime touchdown score plus 165. First touchdown score is plus 1,000, but yeah, no yardage yet.
For the banged up player, plus 165, that's a pretty good number for him to get in the end zone. Just throwing it out there.
Let's go to Seahawks at Cardinals. Pretty good game this week. Cardinals told us ahead of week 13 that they were making it a point to get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved again as a centerpiece of the offense. He did have 12 targets, only caught 5 balls, 60 yards, and a touchdown. It's not a terrible day, but relative to the target total and relative to kind of the way Jonathan Gannon was speaking up about what they were going to do with Harrison that week, bit of a disappointment. Fitz, what do we expect from Harrison against Seattle?
I don't know if I can answer that question with any certainty, considering his target counts have been all over the place. And it's nice that Jonathan Gannon did talk about wanting to get him more involved, and we saw, a season high in targets. But it was only the third time this year that Marvin Harrison Jr. has had 8 or more targets in a game. Only the third. So I've got him ranked as a low-end wide receiver 2. I think you're probably starting him under most circumstances, but really hard to feel confident in him when his role has sort of ebbed and flowed over the course of the season.
What do you think, D-Bro?
I'm not confident in Marvin Harrison Jr. at all this week. And I think looking at his usage last week, Brian Flores changed up what he's done the entire season. And I think that is the biggest reason why that came to fruition about Harrison Jr. getting the work, because Brian Flores has been too high coverage. It's been number 1, number 2 almost every single week in the NFL of how much too high. Brian Flores switched it up. They had almost 65% of the defensive snaps were single high coverage last week. That has been, and again, going back to these wide receivers that have the massive splits, Harrison Jr. is firmly in that conversation. Against single high teams, he's been the guy that we wanted him to be. Against 2 high teams, he has been a ghost. I think we see him ghost again this week because unlike Flores, Seattle, and people will say, why is their pass defense playing so much better over the last few weeks? It's because McDonald took a hard look in the mirror and said, look, we don't have the personnel. We're not going to play single high anymore. They came out at the beginning of the season playing single high at one of the highest rates in the NFL. They have since transitioned to a lot of 2 high coverage. So like over the last, I think it's the last 2 to 3 weeks, almost 56% of their coverage snaps have been in 2 high coverage. Harrison Jr.'s numbers versus 2 high, 18.6% target share, 1.45 yards per route run. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. this week as my wide receiver 27.
I'm going to predict right now that Marvin Harrison Jr. is our most discussed player in the offseason because I am just so curious where he's going to be ranked for 2020. I mean, he has 2 games this season over 64 receiving yards, and they were both, 111 and 130. But in the weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown, and everybody relies on touchdowns to a degree, in the weeks where he doesn't score a touchdown, he hasn't just been disappointing. He's been unplayable. The yardage and the catches just aren't there. So he's so talented, though.
To that point, Worm, this is not a Marvin Harrison Jr. problem. This is a Drew Petzig problem. This is a usage problem. This is a route tree problem. This is not his ability to get open problem. So I think this is where one of the offseason things where the Cardinals really have to take a hard look and say, look, we need to use this guy different. We are not utilizing him to the best of his abilities and his skill set. So really the way that I'm going to follow on that, what I've said the entire season and what I was saying the offseason is the OC's got to do a better job of doing his freaking job. If he does that, then Marvin Harrison Jr. plays better.
I wanted to throw out another question from a player in this game. Kenneth Walker, Fitz, has only rushed for 70-plus yards once since week 4. Is there any cause for concern here?
Yes, because the Seahawks offensive line isn't very good. PFF grades them 26th in run blocking, and the Seattle offensive line is 29th in adjusted line yards. So I'm not that worried about Kenneth Walker himself. I really like the player. I'm worried about what's in front of him.
D-Bro?
I'm worried about it twofold. Well, actually three different things. I'm worried about the offensive line is terrible. Like that has been the problem for really this entire offense. I mean, it's been the problem of why Geno has been a roller coaster. It's been the problem why Kenneth Walker can't get loose. His per touch metrics, his missed tackle force rate has been otherworldly this year. He just, what's he supposed to do when he gets the ball in his hands and he's got 2-3 defenders in his face already? But the other part about this is I'm worried about Kenneth Walker even playing this week. Limited practice to open a week. On Thursday, he was a DMP. So anybody listening to this needs to be picking up Zach Charbonnet. Look for him in your waiver wires. But even if Kenneth Walker does play, I think we see more Charbonnet. And I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know what kind of voodoo magic Jonathan Gannon has going on with this defense. Because if you look at the depth chart, bro, they shouldn't be playing as good as they're doing, but they're doing it. Since week 8, they've allowed the 6th fewest rushing yards per game and the 7th lowest yards after contact per attempt. So I'm worried on multiple levels, even if Walker plays this week.
Chargers at Chiefs. Before we get to the key question for Sunday night's matchup, I want to ask you guys about your Uber Eats Sunday night meals of the week. Debro, what must-order food gets you reaching for your Uber Eats app for great game day deals when you think of Kansas City?
This was easy, boys. This was easy. It's burn-ins. It has to be burn-ins. It's going to be burn-ins. There's no way that I'm walking into Kansas City and I'm not walking out of it with my stomach full of meat that is slathered in barbecue sauce. That has to happen.
I
think that's a totally fair answer here. Fitz, what are you going with?
Yeah, I mean, burnt ends is my go-to when I go to Arthur Bryant's, and I've spent a lot of time in Kansas City, so this question is near and dear to my heart. My dad used to live there, but actually, I know it's sacrilege, but I'm not going with barbecue. There is a place in Kansas City called Stroud's that has the best fried chicken I have ever had in my life. Pan-fried chicken at Stroud's. Oh my goodness. Like I'm not even a big fried chicken guy. Like I don't make it in my house. I rarely, if ever, go to like Popeyes or KFC, but Stroud's is just to die for. And man, like their gravy too at Stroud's that you put on their mashed potatoes. They do this thing where after they pull the chicken out of the deep fryer, they let it cool on this grating and they collect the little bits that flake off from underneath the grating and dump it into the gravy. They call them the cracklins. Those are the little batter pieces. Oh man, this Stroud's is like a once in a lifetime eating experience. You have to go there if you like good old American food, man. Stroud's is
I mean,
amazing.
If you're part of the country, like good fried chicken is almost like a delicacy. Like that's probably like Haley's Comet, right, Fitzy?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, Chicago. I mean, there are some good fried chicken places in Chicago, no question about it. But Stroud's, man, like, there's nothing like it.
Making me hungry.
You got to go barbecue when you're talking Kansas City. I would actually have picked ribs regardless of with what Debra went with the burnt ends. I prefer ribs anyway. I don't get ribs that often, but whenever I do, I'm like, I should get ribs more. These are great, and I really haven't spent any time in Kansas City, but obviously I know they're known for that, and I would love to get just a great rack of ribs in Kansas City. So there you have it. Our Uber Eats Sunday night meals of the week: Stroud's fried chicken, burnt ends, and ribs, which, by the way, sounds like a great spread at a viewing party of Sunday Night Football. So anybody in Kansas City, you should order some on Uber Eats, which now has the best game day deals all season long. Order now for game day. All right, guys, on this game, really, really fun game. I think I'm excited to watch this one. Did we learn anything about either of these backfields last week? The Chargers in their first week without Dobbins, or the Chiefs in their first week with Pacheco back? Debra, I'll start with you.
Both these backfields are a freaking mess, dude. That's what I take away from both of them. Like, it's dart throws, it's dice rolls. Like, Pacheco played 37% of the snaps. I mean, he split evenly the red zone snaps with Kareem Hunt. He split evenly the rushing snaps, and he only got 25% of the red zone carries. I think that looking at the Kansas City backfield, I do believe Pacheco is going to get more work this week. I think the red zone role kind of flips. Either it's split between him and Hunt, or he takes over the red zone role. So I'm probably going to be a little bit higher. Like, where's Pacheco at in consensus right now, Worm?
I'll pull it up.
He's like low end RB1. I want to say like 23 or 24.
Oh, low end RB2, you mean?
Sorry, RB2.
Yeah, he's RB24 in half PPR.
Yeah,
PCR.
I'm probably going to move him up a few spots depending on that, because I could see him taking over the red zone role. The Chargers have been an abysmal run defense. Like, they started off the year being amazing, and now they have fallen off like massively. Like, this looks like Brandon Staley's run defense over the last few weeks. So Pacheco, I think, does lead them. I don't want to play Kareem Hunt because the thesis behind Hunt has been volume and not efficiency. And now the volume is going away. And I think the red zone role goes to Pacheco this week. And I don't want to play anybody from the freaking Chargers backfield. Like, Gus has no gas left in the tank. None. And I think that there's only a certain amount, like, at some point, Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman have to look in the mirror and say, okay, like, at what point are we going to continue to do this and hope that Gus Edwards is going to look better when he doesn't look good and he looks like a player on his last legs in the NFL? And at what point are we going to give the backfield to Kamani Vidal? I think it happens this week, but I can't tell you that with any amount of certainty. I don't want to play as Gus Edwards because it's literally 2 yards and a cloud of dust, and he does not play on passing downs. So I don't want to start anybody from the Chargers. If you have to start anybody at all from this backfield, it's Kamani Vidal as a dart throw in the dark, but it's really nobody.
Fitz, Isaiah Pacheco, RB24, Gus Edwards, RB28, Kareem Hunt, RB30, Kamani Vidal, RB41. Just kind of a mess from both backfields here, like Debro said. How are you approaching the situation for both teams?
Well, I mean, I think we know that Kareem Hunt isn't going to hold off Isaiah Pacheco much longer. They pretty much split work down the middle last week, but it was Pacheco's first game back from that leg injury. Not surprised that the Chiefs, with only one loss, they have the luxury of sort of easing Pacheco back into action. But you could see that Pacheco's just 10 times the player Kareem Hunt is. So I think... Like, I just bet an under on Kareem Hunt's rushing yardage, which was only at like 33.5, but I think it's going to be more the Pacheco show this week. Like, I'll be surprised if Kareem Hunt sees double-digit carries. So, yeah, and then I totally agree with Debro. Like, Gus Edwards just doesn't have much juice. And we didn't really get to see too much from the Chargers running game last week at all. It was just sort of a weird game for them. They ran very few offensive plays in that game against the Falcons. But yeah, it's clear Gus does not have much left in the tank. And I do think it's inevitable that we see more of Kamani Vidal.
Let's go to Monday Night Football to wrap things up. Bengals at Cowboys. I want to ask about Rico Dowdle and T. Higgins, who are very close to each other in our ECR flex rankings. They were just a couple of spots apart when I put this outline together. I'm trying to find where they're 2 spots apart in the flex rankings right now. In fact, the only player between them is Guerendo, ironically. But of Rico Dowdle and T. Higgins, who do we like better for their matchup on Monday Night Football? Fitz, I'll start with you.
Oh, Higgins. Give me the stud wide receiver in the high-flying offense. Like, it's great that the Cowboys do now seem fully committed to Dowdle as their lead running back. He's had 41 carries in his last 2 games, and the matchup against the Bengals isn't bad at all. But this is not a high-flying Dallas offense. So the offensive line isn't at full strength now with Zach Martin out for the year. I prefer T. Higgins.
I'm not necessarily surprised you said Higgins. I was a little surprised with how much conviction you had because Dowdle obviously coming off a strong game, and the Cincinnati has at least a reputation of being a very poor run defense this year. They've been pretty good in some matchups, but they've also been pretty terrible in others. Our kind of matchup rating system on FantasyPros.com does give it kind of like a 4-star matchup for Rico Dowdle, whereas Higgins only gets a 3-star matchup going up against Dallas. So again, I'm not surprised that Higgins is higher, but I kind of thought they might be a little closer in your mind. Debra, what do you think?
I agree with Fitzy. I think it's easy T. And this isn't shade at Rico Dowdle. Like, 2 things on this. Why the hell wasn't Rico Dowdle this guy the entire season? I'm sorry. Like, how many weeks do we need to see Zeke run into like 2 yards in a cloud of dust before Dallas was like, oh, wow, yeah, Rico Dowdle's a better running back. We should use him more. We actually want to get positive yards when we run the ball. Sounds smart. Except it took them forever to do it. This comes down to, and the reason I think this is easy T, is that I worry with Dallas that the game script and everything goes sideways. Like, if Cincinnati comes out and they absolutely just truck stick them, that's where I worry, does this become a blowout game? And do we see Rico not playing much in the 4th quarter because Dallas is just kind of closed up shop? So that's where... It's not the matchup. The matchup is freaking fantastic. If I was Dallas and I was McCarthy, I'd say, look, at some point you need to wake up and realize Cooper Rush is not Dak Prescott. Stop running a fast, high-paced offense and throwing the freaking ball as much as you are, and realize that you need to run the ball and you need to try to sit here and play keep away from some of these offenses and use your running back and lean on this bad run defense. I don't have a lot of faith in McCarthy to do that. So I worry Cincy gets out to a big lead and this becomes a blowout, and that could limit Rico's volume in this matchup.
Fitz, correct me if I'm wrong or if this has been updated since, but it looks like your most recent updated flex rankings on the site, you do have them just one spot apart. So is that something where you expect your final rankings will have a wider gap there?
Yeah, they should not be one spot apart. I greatly prefer Higgins.
Okay. No, that's fair. They are, like I said, only 2 spots apart in ECR, but we definitely, it sounds like Higgins much more. We will wrap up there. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This is the last kind of full show before the fantasy playoffs are determined in a lot of leagues. So I hope we can help you get over the hump if you are fighting for that final playoff spot. If you do have more questions and just, you putting kind of everything into this week to try and get into the playoffs. We are on Discord, Debro, Fitz, also Erickson, a whole bunch of other folks have, AMA channels on there, or also on Twitter, everywhere on social media. So feel free to keep asking questions. We'll have live streams on YouTube as well for a final kind of day of, morning of, start, sit decision. So we are here to help you get into the fantasy playoffs. Best of luck this week for everyone, especially if you were facing one of those many players who went off last night. For Fitz and Debro, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.